People hear the name Machiavelli and think of backstabbing, scheming, the guy twirling his mustache in the shadows. But that's the wrong take. Machiavelli wasn't inventing evil. He was just taking notes. He was a diplomat in Florence. He saw power up close. He saw how kings and popes actually behaved, not how they claimed to behave. And when he got exiled, he wrote a little book, The Prince. It's not a doorstop. It's barely a pamphlet. You could read it in an afternoon. But don't let the size fool you. It's dense. It's heavy. Machiavelli is writing this essentially as a job application to the Medici family, trying to get back into the game. So he doesn't waste time with flowery language. He's efficient, brutally so. The structure is simple, almost deceptively so. There are 26 chapters. Some are tiny, just a few paragraphs. Others stretch out a bit, but he never rambles. He breaks it down like an engineer taking apart an engine. The first chunk, chapters 1 through 11, he looks at the different types of states, principalities, how you get them, how you hold them, hereditary versus new. Then, chapters 12 to 14, he talks about the military, mercenaries versus your own troops. Spoiler alert, he hates mercenaries. He warns that if you pay men to fight for you, they'll run when things get real. Then we hit the core, chapters 15 to 23. This is the stuff that got the book banned, the qualities of the prince, how to act. He argues that trying to be good in a world that is strictly not good is a suicide mission. He strips away the moralizing and looks at effectiveness. Finally, the last few chapters, he looks at Italy, why it's a mess, why the princes lost their states. It's a survival guide. He's telling you that the world is a dangerous place, and if you want to survive, you better know the rules. Machiavelli doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He opens the book by slicing the political world into two distinct halves. You've got republics, and you've got principalities. That's it. And since this isn't a book about committees or voting, he shoves republics aside to focus entirely on the prince. He categorizes power like a biologist dissecting a specimen. He tells us principalities are either hereditary, where your family has ruled for ages, or they are new. The hereditary ones, they're the easy mode. People are used to you. But the new ones, that's where the trouble starts. He points out that new doesn't just mean building a kingdom from scratch. It means annexation, taking over. And here's the kicker. He warns that the difficulty of holding on to that power depends entirely on the people you've conquered. Are they used to living under a master? Or are they used to being free? Because if they're used to freedom, they won't put on the chains quietly. Machiavelli argues that you acquire these states either by luck, fortune, or by your own ability, by the arms of others or your own. And as we'll see, relying on luck, that's a strategy for the naive. Machiavelli starts off with what you might call the easy mode of leadership, hereditary states. If you're born into power, he argues, the game is rigged in your favor. Why? Because human beings are creatures of habit. They love the familiar. He points out that people are already used to your family's bloodline. They've lived under it for generations. So the prince doesn't need to be a genius here. He just needs to be competent. Don't rock the boat. Keep the old institutions. Don't change the laws just for the sake of it. Machiavelli says if a hereditary prince has even average intelligence and diligence, he'll hold on to his state. It's inertia. Unless, of course, an overwhelming force, some outside conqueror comes in and smashes everything. But here's the cynical part. Machiavelli notes that even if you lose your throne, you'll probably get it back. The conqueror will make mistakes. They always do. They have to offend people to seize power.
You don't. He explains that a hereditary prince has less reason to hurt his subjects. He doesn't need to confiscate land or execute rivals just to prove he's in charge, so he's more loved, or at least less hated. And he drops a crucial insight here about time. Machiavelli suggests that long rule washes away the memory of past revolutions. People forget why things were ever different.
Stability breeds stability. So for the hereditary ruler, the biggest danger isn't the people, it's his own incompetence. Just don't be reckless, and the throne stays yours. So, you've got yourself a new state. Not one you inherited, that's easy mode, but one you've added to your existing power, a mixed principality. Machiavelli warns you right out of the gate. This is where the trouble starts. He identifies a natural difficulty here, and it's not about armies or gold, it's about human nature. He points out that people change their masters willingly, hoping for better. They think, this new guy, he'll fix everything. So they take up arms against the old ruler. But here's the cold shower. Machiavelli says they are deceived. Experience tells them later that things have actually gotten worse. Why? Because you, the new prince, can't help but hurt them. It's inevitable. You have to burden them with your soldiers, with taxes, with the countless injuries that come with an occupation. So now you've got enemies. Everyone you injured seizing the place? Enemies. But what about the people who opened the gates for you? The ones who wanted you there? You've lost them too. Machiavelli argues you can't satisfy their expectations. They wanted paradise, you brought politics. And you can't use strong medicine against them. You can't just crush them, because you are indebted to them. You need the goodwill of the natives to hold a place, no matter how strong your army is. This is why Louis XII of France took Milan quickly and lost it just as fast. The people realized they made a mistake. They traded one problem for a bigger one. Now, Machiavelli digs deeper. He says it depends on what you conquer. If you take a territory that shares your language, your customs, and is in the same area, that's easy. To hold it, he suggests you only need to do two things. First, destroy the family of the old prince. Wipe out the bloodline. No pretenders allowed. Second, don't change their laws or their taxes. Do that, and they blend in with your old state. They stay quiet. But if you acquire a state with different languages, different customs, different laws, here is the problem. This is where you need great luck and great industry. Machiavelli offers a few remedies. The best one? Go live there. Establish your residence. If you are on the spot, you see disorders when they are small. You can fix them. If you're away, you only hear about the mess when it's too big to fix. Plus, your officials can't rob the place blind if you're watching. The subjects can access you. They can love you or fear you, but they know you are there. The second remedy is colonies. Machiavelli is obsessed with efficiency here. He says send a few colonies to key shackles of the state. It's cheap. Who gets hurt? Only the few people whose land you take to give to the new colonists. And here is his brutal logic. The people you strip of land are poor and scattered. They can't hurt you. The rest of the population? They didn't lose anything, so they are quiet. But they are also afraid. Afraid that as they step out of line, they'll be maxed. So, colonies cost little, they are more faithful, and they injure fewer people. Now, compare that to a military garrison. Machiavelli hates garrisons. He says they are useless. They eat up all the revenue of the state. You turn your gain into a loss. And worse, you annoy everyone. The soldiers quartering in homes, the insolents, everyone becomes an enemy. And these are enemies who can hurt you because they are beaten but still in their own homes. So he lays down a rule, one of the most famous in the book. Men ought either to be well treated or crushed. Think about that. If you injure someone lightly, they can take revenge.
They survive, they harbor a grudge, they strike back. But if you crush them, if you destroy them completely, they can't revenge themselves. So he argues, the injury you do to a man should be such that you do not fear his vengeance. That is dark, but it's practical. Machiavelli then moves to foreign policy in these mixed states. He says you must become the defender of the weaker neighbors and weaken the powerful ones. And whatever you do, never ever let a foreigner as powerful as you enter the region. Why? Because the dissatisfied locals will rally to the outsider. He points to the Romans. They were masters of this. In Greece, they held the Achaeans and Aetolians close, the weak guys. They humbled the kingdom of Macedon. They drove out Antiochus. They never let the weak get too strong, and they never let a strong rival get a foothold. The Romans saw trouble coming from miles away. They didn't wait. Machiavelli uses a medical analogy here. He talks about hectical fever. In the beginning of the illness, it is easy to cure but difficult to detect. But if you wait, if you let time pass, it becomes easy to detect but impossible to cure. Statecraft is the same. If you spot a threat early, you can fix it. But if you wait until everyone can see it, it's too late. The Romans fought wars just to avoid fighting bigger wars later. They knew that war is never avoided, only postponed to the advantage of the enemy. Then Machiavelli turns his eyes to Louis XII again. He dissects the French king's failure in Italy. It's a laundry list of incompetence. Louis made 5 distinct errors. 1. He destroyed the minor powers, the very people he should have protected. 2. He increased the strength of one of the greater powers in Italy, the Church. 3. He brought in a foreign power, Spain. 4. He didn't live there. 5. He didn't establish colonies. And he even made a 6th error. He tried to take land from the Venetians. Now, if he hadn't made the other mistakes, breaking Venice would have been fine. But because he had already strengthened the Church and brought in Spain, he needed Venice strong to balance them out. He dismantled his own safety net. When people told Machiavelli that Louis gave territory to the Pope and Spain just to avoid a war, Machiavelli shot back with his golden rule. You never let a disorder continue just to avoid a war, because you don't avoid it, you just defer it to your own disadvantage. The result? Louis lost Lombardy. He lost everything he gained. Machiavelli finishes with a general rule, one that rarely fails. He who is the cause of another becoming powerful is ruined. Because if you make someone else powerful, you do it through your own cleverness or strength. And once that person is powerful, they view your cleverness and your strength as a threat. So the lesson is clear. If you take a mixed state, don't be passive. Don't be nice just to be nice. Crush your enemies effectively. Protect the weak neighbors. Watch the horizon for storms. And for God's sake, don't build up a rival who will eventually eat you. It's a valid question. Maybe the most important question for any conqueror. Alexander the Great sweeps across Asia. He takes everything. Then he dies young. The logical outcome? Chaos, rebellion. The whole thing should have crumbled back into dust the moment he was gone. But it didn't. His successors held on to it. Their only real trouble came from their own ambition, fighting each other, not from the people they conquered. So Machiavelli stops and asks why. He doesn't chalk it up to Alexander's charisma or some mystical greatness. No, Machiavelli argues it comes down to the machinery of the state itself. He points out that historically, there are only 2 ways to run a principality. First, you have the model of the Turk, the Ottoman Empire. One prince, everyone else, servants, administrators. They serve at his pleasure. He can move them, fire them, or kill them whenever he wants. Then you have the model of the King of France. Here, the king is surrounded by ancient nobles, barons. These aren't servants. They have their own bloodlines, their own subjects, their own rights. The king didn't give them that power, and he can't easily take it away. Here is the brutal trade-off Machiavelli identifies. The Turk model, that centralized power, is incredibly hard to conquer. You can't bribe the ministers because they owe everything to the prince. They have no independent loyalty from the people. So you have to beat them on the battlefield. It's a grind. But, and this is the crucial part, once you win, once you wipe out the ruling family, it is incredibly easy to hold. There's nobody left with the authority to challenge you. No local lords to stir up trouble. You just sit in the big chair and the machinery keeps turning. Now look at France. Machiavelli says this is the opposite. It is easy to invade. There's always a disgruntled baron ready to open the gates for you. You can waltz right in. But holding it, a nightmare. You can't kill all the nobles. There are too many. You can't satisfy them all. Even if you kill the king, the barons are still there, acting as heads of their own little rebellions. You win the war, but lose the peace. Machiavelli applies this to Alexander. He argues that the kingdom of Darius was like the Turk, centralized, hard to break. But once Alexander broke it, once Darius was dead, the game was over. There were no hereditary barons in Persia to raise an army against the Greeks. The power vacuum was filled instantly by the new management. So he warns us, don't look at the conqueror's talent alone. Look at the structure of what they conquered. That dictates whether the victory sticks or if it slips through your fingers. So you've conquered a free city, a place that's used to making its own rules, living by its own laws. Congratulations! Machiavelli warns you've just taken on the hardest job in politics, because people addicted to freedom, they make terrible subjects. He lays out 3 ways to handle this specific headache. Just 3. First, you can ruin them, destroy the place. Second, you can go live there yourself. Third, you can let them keep their laws, extract a tribute, and set up a friendly oligarchy, a puppet government, to keep things in check. Now, that third option sounds nice, doesn't it? Civilized. But Machiavelli points out it's a trap. He argues that a puppet state only survives because of your support. It's shaky, it's weak. If you really want to hold a city that's known liberty, he says there is only one safe method: total destruction. He's brutal here. He says that if you become the master of a city accustomed to freedom and you don't destroy it, you should expect to be destroyed by it. Why? Because they never forget. Machiavelli argues that the memory of their old liberty and their ancient institutions never dies. Time doesn't erase it. Benefits don't erase it. At the slightest crisis, that memory comes roaring back. They will revolt. They will fight to get that old life back. Compare that to a city used to a prince. If their old ruler is gone, they don't know what to do. They're used to obeying, but they have no one to obey. They're slow to take up arms. Machiavelli notes you can win them over easily. But a republic, no. There's too much life in it. Too much hatred for the conqueror. The desire for vengeance is too strong. So Machiavelli's advice is cold, hard, and pragmatic. Either go live there and watch them like a hawk, or wipe the slate clean, destroy the city, because as long as the memory of freedom exists, you are not safe. This is where the rubber meets the road. Machiavelli stops talking about hereditary princes, those lucky few born into power, and shifts his gaze to the self-made ruler, the one who carves out a kingdom using his own skill, his own virtue, and his own weapons. And let's be clear, Machiavelli has a lot more respect for this guy. Why? Because relying on luck is a sucker's bet. He starts with a brilliant metaphor. He says a prudent man should act like a skilled archer. If your target is too far away, You don't aim at it. You aim high. You aim way above the mark, not because you want to shoot the clouds, but because you know gravity, reality, will pull the arrow down. You aim for the greatness of ancient legends, so that even if you fall short, you still land somewhere respectable. But here is the hard truth he lays out. Acquiring a state by your own ability is brutal. It's a nightmare. The struggle is immense at the start. But if you survive, holding on to it is actually easier. Machiavelli points out the biggest hurdle you'll face: innovation. He warns that there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Think about that. When you try to change the rules, you are walking into a buzzsaw. Why? Because everyone who profited from the old system, they are now your sworn enemies. They will fight you with the fury of fanatics. And the people who might benefit from your new system, they're lukewarm. They don't really trust you. Machiavelli calls this the incredulity of mankind. People don't believe in the new thing until they've touched it, tasted it, and seen it work for a long time. So you have a situation where your enemies attack like wolves, and your defenders defend you like cowards. This brings Machiavelli to his most cynical, yet practical point in the chapter: the question of force. He asks, can these innovators stand on their own, or do they depend on others? Do they have to beg, or can they use force? If you have to beg, you're finished. You will achieve nothing. But if you depend on your own arms, if you can force the issue, you rarely fail. This is why he drops one of his most famous lines: all armed prophets have conquered, and the unarmed ones have been destroyed. He looks at history: Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, Theseus. They couldn't have made their people follow their new constitutions for long if they had been unarmed. Then he points to Girolamo Savonarola, a friar who tried to rule by moral authority alone. The moment the crowd stopped believing, he had no way to make them believe, and he was ruined. It comes down to this. Machiavelli argues that the nature of the people is fickle. It's easy to persuade them of something, but hard to keep them persuaded. So you must be arranged in such a way that when they no longer believe, you can make them believe by force. It sounds harsh. It is harsh. But Machiavelli looks at a guy like Hiero of Syracuse, who rose from a private citizen to a prince, and nods in approval. Hiero abolished the old militia, established a new one, left his old alliances, and formed new ones. It was hell to build the foundation, but once it was built, he could build anything he wanted on top of it. So we come to the other side of the coin. In the last chapter, Machiavelli talked about the guys who did it the hard way, the ones who used their own skill, their own muscle, their virtù. And yeah, that road is brutal. But this chapter, chapter 7, this is about the guys who take the shortcut. Machiavelli calls this principalities acquired by the arms of others or by good fortune. Basically, getting lucky. He starts with a warning that sounds almost like modern investment advice. He points out that private citizens who become princes just through sheer luck, well, they have an easy flight to the top. It's smooth sailing. They buy their way in, or maybe a powerful relative hands them a title. They don't sweat, they don't bleed, they just arrive. But here's the kicker. Machiavelli says the trouble starts after they land. See, getting there is easy. Staying there, that's the nightmare. He argues that these accidental princes are standing on quicksand. They rely entirely on the will and fortune of the people who put them there. And Machiavelli tells us, straight up, that those are two of the most unstable, flighty things on earth. You can't build a house on a mood swing, and you certainly can't build a state on someone else's favor. He explains it with this brilliant biological analogy. He says,
States that rise up suddenly are like nature, like plants that spring up overnight. They have no roots, they have no fibers. The first storm comes along, a rebellion, a shift in alliances, and snap, they're gone.
Unless, and this is the big unless of the chapter, Machiavelli says that even if you get power through luck, you can keep it. But you have to be a genius. You have to be quick. You have to hustle to lay the foundations after you get the job, foundations that the other guys laid before they got the job. He gives us 2 examples to compare, Francesco Sforza and Cesare Borgia. Sforza is the chapter 6 guy. He had the skill, he struggled, he climbed the ladder 1 rung at a time, and because of that, he stayed at the top easily. Then there's Cesare Borgia, Duke Valentino. Now pay attention here, because Machiavelli is practically obsessed with this guy. Borgia is the heart of this chapter. He acquired his state through the fortune of his father, Pope Alexander VI, and he lost it when his father's luck ran out. But, and this is why Machiavelli respects him so much, Borgia didn't just sit there. He knew he was in a precarious spot. He knew he was living on borrowed time and borrowed power. So Machiavelli walks us through every single move Borgia made to try and turn that fortune into virtue, to turn luck into control.
Machiavelli actually says, "I do not know what better precepts to give a new prince than the example of his actions." Think about that. He's holding up a guy who ultimately failed as the perfect model for how to act. Why? Because of how ruthlessly Borgia tried to secure his position. Let's look at the mess Borgia was in. Machiavelli points out that Borgia's power depended on the French king and the Pope. That's bad. You're not your own master. Plus, the armies he was using, the Orsini family mercenaries, were unreliable. They were thinking about taking him out. So what does Borgia do? Machiavelli notes that he stops relying on others. He decides to stop using French troops and stop using mercenaries. He decides to stand on his own 2 feet. First, he weakens the rival factions in Rome. He creates his own political base. He buys off the noblemen. He gives them good salaries, cushy jobs, military commands. Machiavelli observes that within a few months, the loyalty of these guys shifted from their old families directly to the Duke. That's step 1, buy the opposition. Then things get bloody. Borgia realizes his mercenary captains, the Orsini, are plotting against him. They try to patch things up, hold a meeting. Borgia plays nice. He smiles, he invites them to Sinigalia, and once he has them cornered, he kills them, all of them. Machiavelli doesn't flinch at this. In fact, he approves. He sees it as a necessary step to consolidate power. You can't rule if your generals are sharpening knives behind your back. But the real masterclass, the part of the chapter that makes people shiver, is what happened in the Romagna. Machiavelli tells us that when Borgia took over the Romagna, it was a mess. Robbery, feuds, chaos. It was being run by weak lords who were bleeding the people dry. Borgia needed to clean it up. He needed to bring order. So he hires a guy named Ramiro de Orco. Machiavelli describes Ramiro as a cruel and efficient man. Borgia gives him absolute power, and Ramiro delivers. He crushes the crime. He terrifies the population into submission. He restores peace. But now Borgia has a problem. Ramiro was too good. He was hated. Machiavelli warns that if you keep a guy like that around too long, the people will hate you by association. So what does the Duke do? Machiavelli describes the scene with a cold, almost cinematic precision. One morning, the people of Cesena wake up and walk into the town square. And there, they find Ramiro de Orco, cut in 2 pieces, a block of wood and a bloody knife beside him. That's it. No trial, no speech, just the body. Machiavelli writes that this spectacle left the people at once satisfied and stupefied. Analyze that phrase, satisfied and stupefied.
Borgia used Ramiro to do the dirty work, then killed him to show the people, hey, I'm not the bad guy. He was the bad guy. And look, I saved you from him. It purged the hatred and instilled fear at the same time. It's brilliant, it's horrifying, and Machiavelli loves it. So Borgia had the foundations. He had the army, he had the people terrified and quiet. He was ready. But then everything fell apart. Machiavelli attributes this failure to extraordinary and extreme malignity of fortune, basically the worst luck imaginable. Pope Alexander VI died unexpectedly, and at the exact same moment, Cesare Borgia himself got deathly ill. He was on his deathbed right when he needed to be strongest. Machiavelli argues that Borgia had thought of everything. He had a plan for what to do if his father died. But he never planned on being dying himself at the same time. However, Machiavelli does criticize him for one thing, one fatal error. After his father died, there was an election for the new pope. Borgia allowed Julius II to be elected. Julius was a man Borgia had offended in the past, a man who hated him. Machiavelli warns us here. He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived. You can't buy off someone you've humiliated. You can't expect forgiveness from a wolf you once kicked. Borgia thought he could control the new pope. He was wrong. That mistake, Machiavelli says, was his ruin. So what's the takeaway from Chapter 7? It's a warning. If you get lucky, if you get handed power, don't celebrate, panic, work twice as hard. Take those roots in fast. Eliminate the people who gave you the power, so you don't owe them anything. Machiavelli is telling us that fortune is a lender, not a giver. Eventually, she comes to collect. And if you haven't built your own dam to hold back the river, you're going to drown. Borgia built the dam, but even he got swept away. What chance do the rest of us have if we rely on luck? None. You have to make your own arms. You have to stand on your own ground. Anything else is just waiting to fall.
This is where things get ugly. We're not talking about luck anymore. We're not talking about skill or virtue. Machiavelli takes the gloves off here and looks at the third way to power: wickedness, criminal acts, absolute brutality. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He looks right at it. He brings up Agathocles the Sicilian. Here's a guy who was a nobody, son of a potter, lower than low, but through sheer force of will and a total lack of morals, he climbed the ranks of the military. He becomes praetor of Syracuse. But that wasn't enough. He wanted to be the prince. He wanted to rule alone. So what does he do? One morning, he calls the people and the Senate together, acts like he's got some urgent matters of state to discuss. Then, at a signal, his soldiers kill all the senators and the richest citizens, just wipes them out. In an hour, the opposition is gone. Agathocles seizes the city. He holds it too. No civil war, no internal strife. He won. Agathocles got the power. He kept the throne. But in the history books, he's a butcher. He gets no respect, no honor. If you want power at any cost, this works. If you want a legacy, look elsewhere. But then Machiavelli pivots. Because he's practical, he notices that some cruel leaders hold on to power for a long time, living securely, while others get toppled immediately. Why? What's the difference? He calls it cruelty well used versus cruelty ill used. Yeah, he actually distinguishes between good cruelty and bad cruelty. It sounds cold, but look at the logic.
Cruelty well used, if we can even use that term, is when you do all the nasty stuff at once. One stroke. You commit all the necessary crimes to secure your safety in a single, terrifying wave. And then you stop. You never go back to the knife unless you absolutely have to. Instead, you start pivoting to benefits for your subjects.
That's the secret. Cruelty ill-used is the opposite. It starts small, a little bit of repression here, a little execution there, but instead of stopping, it grows. It gets worse over time. The fear never settles. Machiavelli points out that if you keep hurting people day after day, they never feel safe. They're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And a terrified man who sees no end to his pain is a dangerous man. He has nothing to lose.
So, the lesson: if you have to seize a state, Machiavelli advises you to review all the injuries you need to inflict and do them all at one stroke. Get it over with. Because injuries should be done all together, so that being tasted less, they offend less. But benefits, good deeds, those should be given little by little. Drip feed them, so the flavor lasts longer.
It's brutal arithmetic, but Machiavelli isn't trying to save your soul. He's trying to save your state. And sometimes, he argues, a single massive act of violence is more merciful in the long run than a slow, bleeding chaos that never ends. Now we get to something a bit different, the civil principality. This isn't about storming the gates or inheriting a throne. This is about a private citizen rising to power through the favor of his fellow citizens. Machiavelli looks at this and sees a fundamental friction. He argues that in every single city there are two distinct currents, two humors, the people and the great, and he's brutal about what drives them. The great, the nobles, the elite, they desire to command and oppress. That's their nature. The people, they just want not to be commanded or oppressed. So if you become a prince, you're doing it with the backing of one of these two groups. Machiavelli warns that who you choose determines your survival. If you come to power through the nobles, watch your back. He points out that you'll be surrounded by men who consider themselves your equals. You can't command them, you can't manage them. They helped you up, sure, but they think they own you. But if you rise through the favor of the people, you stand alone. Everyone else obeys. Machiavelli tells us that you can never satisfy the nobles without hurting others. Their appetite for power is endless. But the people, their desire is more honest. They just want security. It's a lower bar to clear. There's a numbers game here too. Machiavelli argues that you cannot secure yourself against a hostile population. There are simply too many of them. But the nobles, that's a small list. You can handle a small list. He also drops a heavy dose of cynicism here. The worst the people will do is abandon you. But the nobles, they have resources, they have foresight. If they turn on you, they won't just leave. They'll actively try to destroy you to curry favor with the next winner. So his advice is stark. If you become prince through the nobles, switch sides, fast. Win the people over, become their protector. Machiavelli claims that when people receive good from a man they expected evil from, they become even more loyal. He knows the old proverb, he who builds on the people builds on the mud. Machiavelli says that's nonsense. Or rather, it's only true if you're a weak leader, expecting the mob to save you when the magistrates come knocking. But if you are a man of spirit, if you keep up their morale, if you don't panic, then the people are a rock-solid foundation. But he leaves us with a final chilling warning. Don't trust the calm times. In times of peace, everyone swears loyalty. They promise to die for you when death is far away. But when the storm hits, they vanish. So Machiavelli says a wise prince must figure out a way to make sure his citizens need him and the state in every possible circumstance. Only then will you find faith. So, how do you actually measure a ruler's strength?
It's not just about gold reserves or fancy titles. Machiavelli cuts right to the chase here. He says there's really only one metric that matters: independence. He asks a simple question: can you hold your own in a fight, run behind their walls and hide? If you're in the second group, he doesn't tell you to give up, but he is brutally practical. He warns you, forget the open country, abandon it, focus entirely on fortifying your town. He points to the German cities of his time as the gold standard. They were free, fortified, and nobody wanted to mess with them. Why? Because Machiavelli argues that men are naturally lazy when it comes to long, grinding sieges. If a prince has strong walls and his people don't hate him, an enemy will think twice before attacking. It's just too much work. But here is where Machiavelli gets really deep into human psychology. He asks, what happens when the enemy arrives and starts burning the farmhouses outside the walls? Won't the people inside who own those farms turn against the prince? You'd think so, but Machiavelli says no. He argues that this destruction actually helps the prince. It sounds twisted, but follow his logic. When the people see their houses burn for the prince's defense, they feel like he owes them. They've sacrificed for him. And Machiavelli observes that it is human nature to love someone just as much for the favors you do for them as for the favors you receive. The shared suffering binds them to the leader. So he concludes that a smart prince can keep morale high, even while the countryside burns, as long as he doesn't run out of food. It's a cold calculation, but it works. Now we get to the strange ones, the outliers, ecclesiastical principalities, church states. Machiavelli looks at these, and you can almost feel him smirking, because these places, they break every single rule he's just spent 10 chapters laying out. He points out that these are the only states that are truly secure and happy. Think about it. The rulers hold power, but they don't defend it. The subjects are governed, but they don't care. They don't rebel. In any other world, a defenseless state gets crushed. But here, nothing happens. They are safe. Machiavelli says, with a heavy dose of irony, mind you, that these principalities are sustained by higher powers and ancient religious ordinances. He claims the human mind can't comprehend them, so he won't even try to analyze them, because they are exalted and maintained by God. But don't let him fool you. He's not being pious. He's being pragmatic. He immediately pivots. He stops talking about God and starts talking about money and muscle. He looks at Pope Alexander VI. Machiavelli argues that before Alexander, the church's temporal power was a joke. The barons in Rome pushed the popes around. But Alexander, he changed the game. He didn't use prayers, he used force. He showed the world how much a pope could actually dominate if he used money and arms. Then came Julius II. He didn't just sit on that inheritance, he expanded it. Machiavelli notes that Julius was even more successful because he did everything to strengthen the church, not just his own family. So here's the lesson. Machiavelli isn't saying God protects the church. He's showing us that even in a religious state, real power comes from political strategy, wealth, and the willingness to crush your enemies. Even the holiest men need to get their hands dirty. Now Machiavelli pivots. He stops talking about how to acquire a state and starts talking about how to keep it, how to keep breathing. And for him, the foundation of any state, new or old, comes down to two things: good laws and good arms. But he doesn't waste time on the laws. He makes a brutal, pragmatic point right out of the gate. He argues that you cannot have good laws where there are no good arms, and where there are good arms, good laws inevitably follow. So he throws the law books out the window and focuses entirely on the sword.
This chapter is famous, it's angry. It's where Machiavelli tears into the concept of mercenaries. He breaks down the military into 3 types: your own troops, auxiliaries, and mercenaries. And he has absolutely no patience for the hired guns. He calls them useless and dangerous. He warns that if a prince holds his state based on mercenary arms, he will never be stable or secure. Never. Why? Because these troops are disunited. They are ambitious, they are undisciplined, and they are unfaithful. Machiavelli paints a picture of men who are brave amongst friends when the wine is flowing, but cowards amongst enemies. They have no fear of God, and they certainly don't keep their word to men. It's a transaction. That's the problem. Machiavelli points out that in peace, you get despoiled by these mercenaries because you have to pay them. In war, you get despoiled by your enemies because the mercenaries won't fight. He cuts to the psychological core of the issue. What motivates a man to die for you? Machiavelli argues that a mercenary has no other passion or reason to keep the field other than a small stipend, a paycheck. And he asks the obvious question, is a little bit of money enough to make a man want to die for you? Of course not. They are more than willing to be your soldiers while you are not at war. But when the war comes, they run or they leave. And he doesn't stop there. He looks at the leadership, the mercenary captains. He puts the prince in a no-win situation, a catch-22. He argues that mercenary captains are either excellent men or they are not. If they are skilled, you can't trust them. Why? Because they always aspire to their own greatness. They will eventually oppress you, their master, or they will turn on others, contrary to your intentions. They are looking out for number 1. But if the captain is not skilled, if he's incompetent, well, then he ruins you the usual way, by losing. So either you get betrayed or you get defeated. Those are the options Machiavelli lays out. He backs this up with history, pointing to the ruin of Italy. He argues that the devastation of Italy in his time was caused by nothing else but resting all her hopes on mercenaries for many years. He points to Carthage, which was nearly overthrown by its own mercenary soldiers after the first war with the Romans, even though the mercenaries were led by Carthage's own citizens. He contrasts this with Rome and Sparta. He points out that they stood for many centuries, armed and free. The Swiss, he notes, are completely armed and completely free. The logic is unbreakable. A weapon in the hand of a citizen is a tool of defense. A weapon in the hand of a stranger is a threat. Machiavelli's verdict is harsh but clear. Experience shows that princes with their own armies achieve great things. Mercenaries do nothing but cause damage. He warns that a republic armed with its own citizens is far less likely to be subjugated by one of its own than a republic armed with foreign forces. Basically, he's telling the prince, do your own dirty work. If you pay someone else to hold the sword, don't be surprised when they turn it on you. If you thought mercenaries were bad, Machiavelli has news for you. Auxiliaries are worse, much worse. This is chapter 13. Here, Machiavelli tackles the idea of calling in a powerful neighbor to help you out. You know the drill. You're in a jam, you're losing a war, so you ask a bigger, stronger state to send their army to save you. Sounds smart, right? It's not. Machiavelli warns that this is the most disastrous mistake a ruler can make. He calls these useless arms.
Now why? Why would he say that about professional soldiers sent by an ally? Because the dynamic is rigged. Machiavelli points out a simple, brutal truth. If these auxiliary troops lose the battle, you are defeated, obviously. But if they win, you are their prisoner. Think about it. These aren't paid guns like mercenaries who might run away. These are united, disciplined soldiers who answer to another master. Machiavelli argues that while mercenaries are dangerous because of their cowardice or ambition,
Auxiliaries are dangerous because of their competence. They are effective. And because they are effective, they hold all the cards once the dust settles. You invited a lion into your house to kill a wolf. Now the wolf is dead, but the lion is still hungry, and he's looking at you.
Machiavelli is incredibly cynical here, but he's right. He says that a wise prince would rather lose with his own troops than win with someone else's. Because a victory won with foreign arms isn't a real victory. It's just a transfer of power. You haven't won, you've just changed owners. He uses the biblical story of David and Goliath to drive this home. It's a great image. David offers to fight the giant, and Saul gives David his own armor. David tries it on, but he refuses it. He tells Saul, "I cannot make use of my own strength with these." He wants to fight with his own sling and his own knife. Machiavelli's analysis? Saul's armor is the auxiliary army. It either falls off your back, weighs you down, or constricts you. It never fits. He points to Cesare Borgia as the case study for getting this right. Borgia started with French auxiliaries. He took Imola and Forli with them. But he realized they were risky. They weren't loyal to him, so he switched to mercenaries, the Orsini and Vitelli. But then he realized they were unreliable and treacherous. So what did he do? He eliminated them all and raised his own troops. Machiavelli notes that Borgia's reputation only really skyrocketed when he was solely dependent on his own soldiers. The takeaway is stark. Machiavelli concludes that no principality is secure without its own arms. Without your own people willing to die for you, you are entirely dependent on fortune. You're gambling, and in politics, gambling is just a slow way of dying. If you want to survive, you need your own sword, not a borrowed one. Machiavelli drops a hammer here. He says a prince should have no other object, no other thought, no other profession but war. That's it. Sounds extreme? Maybe, but look at the logic. He argues that war is the only art expected of a ruler. If you master it, you stay in power. If you ignore it to chase luxury or comfort, you lose your state. It's that simple. He points out a brutal truth about human nature. There is no comparison between an armed man and an unarmed one. None. Machiavelli warns that an armed man will never willingly obey an unarmed one. Why would he? It defies logic. And the unarmed man? He's not safe. He's suspicious of his own soldiers. You can't command respect if you're defenseless. So, if a prince doesn't understand warfare, he can't trust his army, and his army won't respect him. But here's the kicker.
Machiavelli insists this isn't just for wartime. Actually, he says you need to work harder at this during peace. How? 2 ways. First, action. He tells the prince to hunt, not for sport, but to harden the body and learn the land.
You need to know the nature of mountains, the slope of valleys, the flow of rivers. If you don't know your own terrain, you can't defend it. Second, the mind. He urges the prince to read history, study the greats. Alexander the Great studied Achilles. Caesar studied Alexander. Machiavelli says you look at their victories to imitate them and their defeats to avoid them.
The takeaway is clear. A wise prince never idles. Peace isn't a break. It's just preparation time, because when fortune changes, and it always does, you have to be ready to fight back.
This is the turning point, right here. Up until now, you might have thought Machiavelli was just giving standard advice, but in chapter 15, he strips away the varnish. He stops talking about how things should be and starts talking about how they actually are. He dismisses all those philosophers who came before him, Plato, Cicero, the guys who dreamed up imaginary republics and utopias that never existed. Machiavelli argues that chasing those fantasies is a death sentence. He's brutal about it. He points out that there's a massive gap between how we live and how we ought to live. And if you focus on the ought, on being the perfect moral guy, you're not learning self-preservation. You're learning how to destroy yourself. Why? Because, as he warns, a man who insists on being good all the time will inevitably be crushed by the vast number of people who are not good. It's simple math. It's survival.
So here is the hard truth he drops on the prince. You have to learn how not to be good. That doesn't mean you have to be a monster 24/7. It means you need the capacity to be bad, and this is the key, the wisdom to use that capacity when necessity demands it. He looks at the list of qualities people praise: generosity, mercy, honesty. Sure, it'd be nice to have them all, but Machiavelli says that's impossible. Human conditions don't permit it. He argues that some things that look like virtues, they'll actually wreck you. They'll lose you your state. And some things that look like vices, they are the very things that will bring you security and well-being. So stop worrying about the scandal of those vices. If a vice helps you hold on to power, embrace it. Because in the real world, the only metric that matters is survival. Everyone wants to be known as the generous one. It feels good. It looks good. But Machiavelli, he sees right through that vanity. He warns that if you chase a reputation for generosity, you're essentially signing your own political death warrant. Think about it. To be seen as liberal, what we'd call generous today, you have to spend. You have to throw parties, commission art, hand out gold to your friends. Machiavelli points out the obvious problem here. You burn through your resources fast. And when the treasury runs dry, what happens? You can't just stop. That looks like failure. That looks weak. So he argues you're forced to hunt for money. You have to tax your people. You have to squeeze them dry just to keep up appearances. And that's where you lose them. You become rapacious. You become hated, all because you wanted to be liked. Machiavelli notes a brutal irony here. Generosity consumes itself. The more you practice it, the less you are able to practice it. You either become poor and despised, or you steal to stay rich and become hated. Neither is a good luck. Instead, he tells us it's infinitely safer to be called a miser. A skinflint. It stings the ego, sure, but look at the long game. If you hoard your money, you don't have to rob your subjects. You can defend the state without raising taxes. And eventually, Machiavelli suggests a strange paradox takes over. The people actually start to see you as generous. Why? Because you aren't taking their money. By being mean to the few hangers-on at court who want a handout, you're actually being generous to the millions you aren't taxing. There is one exception he grants. If you're leading an army and looting someone else's city, Caesar, Cyrus, Alexander, then spend freely. Machiavelli says give away what isn't yours. It keeps the soldiers happy and adds to your reputation. But with your own money, keep your fist closed. It's not nice, but it is necessary. Machiavelli doesn't pull any punches here. He dives straight into one of the most famous debates in political history. Is it better to be loved or feared? And his answer? It defines his entire philosophy. He starts with a warning about mercy. Everyone wants to be seen as merciful, right? It feels good. But Machiavelli argues that too much mercy is actually dangerous. He points to Cesare Borgia. The man was considered cruel, ruthless, but that cruelty brought order to the Romagna. It united the people and established peace. Now, compare that to the Florentines. They were so terrified of being called cruel that they let Pistoia tear itself apart with riots and bloodshed. Machiavelli asks a hard question here.
who was actually more compassionate? The one who used a little cruelty to save the whole state, or the ones who let chaos reign because they wanted to be nice? He argues that a prince shouldn't worry about the reputation of cruelty if it keeps his subjects united and loyal. A few distinct examples of severity are actually more merciful than allowing disorders to arise, because disorders hurt everyone. Execution only hurts the individual. Then he gets to the core dilemma. Ideally, a prince should be both loved and feared. That's the gold standard. But let's be real, it's incredibly hard to pull off both at the same time. So if you're forced to make a choice, Machiavelli says choose fear. It's safer. Why? Because of human nature. Machiavelli is brutally honest about people. He says men are ungrateful, fickle, pretenders, and runners from danger. As long as you're winning, they're all yours. They offer you their blood, their property, their children, when the need is far away. But the second you actually need them, they turn their backs. He points out that friendships bought with money, not greatness of soul, aren't real. You can't rely on them. Love is held together by a chain of obligation, and because men are selfish, they'll break that chain the moment it suits them. But fear is held by the dread of punishment. That never fails. But, and this is a massive but, Machiavelli warns that you must avoid being hated. There is a line. You can be feared without being loathed. How? Simple. Keep your hands off their property and their women. He drops one of the coldest, most cynical lines in the book right here. He says, a man will forget the death of his father sooner than the loss of his patrimony. Brutal? Yes, but Machiavelli insists that if you start stealing people's stuff, you're finished. So the takeaway is clear. Love is out of your control. It depends on the people. Fear depends on you. A wise prince relies on what he can control, not what others control. Just don't make them hate you. Here's where things get uncomfortable. This is the chapter that probably earned Machiavelli his dark reputation. It's about honesty, or rather, the strategic use of dishonesty. Machiavelli starts by admitting something obvious. He says, look, everyone knows it's praiseworthy for a prince to keep his word, to live with integrity, to not be a snake. Sure, we all get that. But then he looks at the reality. He points out that the princes who actually achieved great things, they made a mockery of their promises. They confused people's brains with cunning, and in the end, they crushed the guys who tried to play by the rules. He argues there are two ways to fight. One is by law, the other is by force. The first is natural to men. The second belongs to beasts. But here's the thing. Laws often aren't enough, so a prince has to know how to be the beast. Machiavelli uses the image of the centaur, half man, half horse, to show that you need both natures. If you only have one, you won't last. And when you act like a beast, he says you need to be both the fox and the lion. See, a lion can crush wolves, but it steps right into traps. A fox can sniff out the trap, but it gets eaten by wolves. You have to be both. So Machiavelli warns, and this is the hard truth. A prudent ruler cannot and must not honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage, or when the reasons for making the promise are gone. If all men were good, this would be terrible advice. But he reminds us, men are wretched. They are liars. They won't keep their word to you, so you are not bound to keep yours to them. But you can't just be a liar openly. He argues you have to be a great pretender and dissembler. You have to fake it. He says people are so simple, so obsessed with their immediate needs, that a deceiver will always find someone willing to be deceived. He stresses that you must seem to have all the virtues: merciful, faithful, humane, religious.
especially religious. He argues that everybody sees what you appear to be, but very few feel what you are. And those few, they don't dare contradict the crowd. The mob is won over by appearances and the final result. So Machiavelli concludes that if a prince conquers and maintains the state, the means will always be judged honorable. Success effectively washes away the sin. This is the big one, Chapter 19. If you've been zoning out, wake up. Machiavelli might play fast and loose with morality, but here, he's talking about survival, pure and simple. He spent 18 chapters telling a prince how to acquire power, how to organize armies, and even how to lie. But all of that is useless, totally worthless, if you get stabbed in the back by your own people. So, Machiavelli pudgets. He drops the nuance and hits us with a rule that isn't optional. Do not be hated, and do not be despised. They sound similar, right? They aren't. Machiavelli distinguishes between them with surgical precision, and understanding the difference is the only thing standing between a ruler and a violent death. Let's start with hatred. Machiavelli argues that hatred is usually a self-inflicted wound. It comes from being predatory. He says the quickest way to make your subjects hate you is to be rapacious, to steal their property and their women. That's it. It's a very cynical, very practical view of human nature. He warns that as long as you don't touch a man's stuff or his family, he'll mostly live quietly. Men will forgive the execution of a father sooner than the loss of their patrimony. It's dark, but ask yourself, is he wrong? Probably not. So if you avoid being a thief, you avoid the worst of the hatred. But what about being despised? This is trickier. Machiavelli points out that a ruler is despised when they appear weak, fickle, frivolous, effeminate, irresolute. If the people think you can't make up your mind, or that you're scared, they won't just dislike you, they'll look down on you. And once they look down on you, the knives come out. He paints a picture of what the opposite looks like. A prince needs to project grandeur. Courage, gravity, strength. When you make a decision, it has to be irrevocable. No takebacks, no, let me think about it. You decide, and that's the law. He argues that if you maintain this kind of reputation, you're inoculated against conspiracy. People are terrified to conspire against a leader who carries that kind of weight. And this is where he gets into the mechanics of fear. He says a prince has two fears. One is internal, his subjects. The other is external, foreign powers. If you have a good army, you handle the external stuff. But the internal stuff, that's the nightmare. That's the conspiracy brewing in the dark. Machiavelli tells us that the best shield against a conspiracy isn't a taller wall or more guards. It's not being hated by the masses. Think about it from the conspirators' point of view. Machiavelli does. He gets right inside their head. He says a conspirator is usually a coward. They need to believe that by killing the prince, they're going to satisfy the people. If they think killing the prince will make the people angry, they won't do it. They aren't suicidal. They want to be heroes, not martyrs. So if the prince is popular, or at least not hated, the conspirator loses his nerve. He gives us a masterclass in government structure here, using the Kingdom of France as an example. He looks at the French Parliament and nods in approval. Why? Because it's a buffer. The King of France had a problem. The nobles were ambitious and arrogant, and the people were scared of them. The king wanted to protect the people and check the nobles. But, and this is the genius part, he didn't want to get his hands dirty. If he sided with the people, the nobles would hate him. If he sided with the nobles, the people would hate him. So what did he do? He set up a third judge, the Parliament. This institution could beat down the nobles and favor the people, and the king could say, hey, it wasn't me.
Machiavelli calls this prudent and stable. The lesson? Princes should delegate the bad news to others and keep the good news for themselves. Let someone else be the bad guy. You just hand out the awards. But then Machiavelli has to deal with the elephant in the room, the Roman emperors. He knows his readers are educated. He knows they're going to say, "Wait a minute, Niccolo. Plenty of Roman emperors were cruel and grand and strong, and they still got murdered." So he stops and takes a deep dive into Roman history. He analyzes a whole string of them: Marcus Aurelius, Commodus, Severus, Antoninus, and a few others. And he finds a pattern that fits his theory, even if it looks messy on the surface. The Roman emperors had a problem modern princes don't. They had a third group to please: the soldiers. The people loved peace and quiet, but the soldiers? They loved war. They loved insolence. They wanted a prince who was rapacious and cruel, so they could get double pay and satisfy their own greed. This created a catch-22. If you satisfied the soldiers, you injured the people, who would then hate you. If you satisfied the people, you angered the soldiers, who would then kill you. Machiavelli looks at Marcus Aurelius. He was the philosopher king. He lived and died in honor. Why? Because he inherited the throne. He didn't owe it to the soldiers or the people, and he had virtues that commanded massive respect. He wasn't hated or despised. But look at his son, Commodus, a monster, cruel, beastly. He satisfied the soldiers all right. But he forgot the second rule: don't be despised. He fought in the gladiator arenas. He acted like a common thug. The soldiers lost respect for him because he had no dignity. His own household conspired against him, and he died. Then there's Severus. Machiavelli is weirdly impressed by Severus. He calls him a fierce lion and a clever fox. Severus oppressed the people to keep the soldiers happy. By all accounts, the people should have hated him enough to kill him. But they didn't. They were awestruck. They were stupefied by his power. He was so ferocious, so competent, that the hatred turned into a paralyzed fear. He survived because he wasn't despised. On the flip side, you have Antoninus, Caracalla. He was a war machine. The soldiers loved him at first, but he went too far. He was so cruel, he killed half the population of Rome and all of Alexandria. Eventually, even his own guards got nervous. You can't just be a butcher. You have to be a calculated butcher. A centurion killed him in the middle of his army. And then the sad case of Alexander. He was good, too good. He was so lenient that during his 14 years, nobody was executed without a trial. But he was considered effeminate. They said he let his mother run the show. He was despised for being soft. The army conspired, and he was dead. So Machiavelli pulls a terrifying conclusion from this. He says, hatred is gained as much by good works as by evil. Read that again. If the group you need to survive, whether it's the people, the rich, or the army, is corrupt, you have to play by their rules. If you try to be good when your support base is bad, you will be destroyed. Being virtuous can get you killed just as fast as being a tyrant if it makes you hated by the guys holding the swords. He wraps up with a piece of advice for a new prince. Don't try to be Marcus Aurelius. You can't afford it yet. Marcus had an established state. You don't. Instead, follow Severus. Take the parts of Severus that are necessary to found your state. The ruthlessness, the strength. Then, once you're stable, you can adopt the glorious parts of Marcus to maintain it. It's about timing. It's about reading the room. To summarize the dossier, avoid being hated by not touching their property. Avoid being despised by not being a wimp. If you have to choose between the people and the army, well, look at who has the weapons. But never, ever let them lose respect for you. Because once the fear is gone and the respect is gone,
You're just a man standing alone in a room full of knives.
Here, Machiavelli tackles the nuts and bolts of security. He's asking the question every paranoid leader eventually asks: how do I make sure no one kills me? And his answers? They aren't what you'd expect. They go against the grain of typical tyrant logic. Take the issue of weapons. A new prince usually thinks, I should disarm the populace, can't have a rebellion if they don't have swords. Machiavelli stops you right there. He argues that's the worst move you can make.
When you arm your subjects, those arms become yours. You take a guy who was indifferent or even suspicious, you put a sword in his hand and say, defend us, and suddenly he's loyal. He has a stake in the game. But strip them of their weapons, he warns that you've just insulted them. You've told them to their faces that you think they are cowards or traitors, and since you can't defend yourself alone, you'll have to hire mercenaries. We already know how Machiavelli feels about mercenaries. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Now, there's an exception. If you are an established prince annexing a new state, like a limb grafted onto a body, then yes, disarm them. Keep the weapons in the hands of your own original soldiers. But for a new prince in a new principality, trusting your people is the only way to survive. Then he looks at the old trick of divide and rule. You know the type, stirring up little fights between factions to keep them too busy to conspire against you. Machiavelli admits this might work in peacetime. It helps manage the crowd, but he points out that it is a sign of weakness. A strong prince doesn't need to play puppet master with petty squabbles. And the danger? As soon as an enemy attacks, your divided city will crack. One faction will side with the invader just to spite the other. It's suicide. He also throws a curveball about enemies. He suggests that the people you are most suspicious of at the start, they often make the best servants, better than the ones who helped you seize power. Why? Because the ones who helped you feel entitled. They want a payout. They think they own you. But the former skeptics, they know they're on thin ice. They have to work double time to prove their loyalty. Machiavelli argues that a smart prince uses that desperation. Finally, fortresses. Princes love building big stone castles. It feels safe. It looks powerful. But Machiavelli asks, who are you building them against? If you build a fortress because you are terrified of your own people, you've already lost. He argues that fortresses can actually be harmful. They make a prince arrogant. You think, I can abuse my people, and if they riot, I'll just hide in my tower. Wrong. Machiavelli warns that no wall is thick enough to stop a population that hates you. They will always find a way to let a foreign enemy in. He points to the Countess of Forli. She had a great fortress. It didn't save her when her people rose up and invited an invader in. So the verdict? He says if you fear your people more than foreigners, build castles. If you fear foreigners more, don't bother. But ultimately, he delivers one of his most famous lines here. The best fortress found is not to be hated by the people. If you have that, you don't need walls. If you don't have that, walls won't save you. Machiavelli starts this chapter with a simple, hard truth. Mediocrity is dangerous. If you want to keep your power, you can't just exist. You need to be noticed. You need renown. He points to Ferdinand of Aragon as the perfect case study. Here's a guy who started as a weak king and ended up the master of Christendom. How? Great enterprises, constant action. He attacked Granada. He expelled the Moors. He kept his subjects so busy wondering what happens next that they didn't have time to plot against him. It's a distraction technique, really. Machiavelli argues that a prince must keep the people dazzled, stunned by his grandeur. If they're watching your victories, they aren't watching your mistakes. But the real meat of this chapter, it's about conflict. This is where Machiavelli gets brutal. He says when two powerful neighbors go to war, you have a choice to make. You pick a side or you stay neutral. And he warns you, neutrality is a suicide note.
We love to think being the peacemaker or the neutral party is smart, safe. Machiavelli laughs at that. He says if you don't declare yourself, you become the prey of the winner. And the loser? They'll be happy to see you crushed because you didn't help them when they needed it.
Think about it. The one who is not your friend will always ask for your neutrality. The one who is your friend will ask you to pick up a weapon. If you refuse both, you're alone. Machiavelli insists that it is always safer to declare yourself. Even if you pick the losing side, you have a bond. You share a fortune. You have an ally for the comeback. But if you sit on the fence, you're just waiting to be eaten. He does add a caveat, though. He warns not to ally with someone stronger than you to attack others, unless you absolutely have to. Because if you win, you're just their prisoner. You want to be the one calling the shots, not the sidekick. Finally, he talks about how to handle the citizens. It's not just about war. The prince has to be seen, award prizes to inventors, encourage trade, meet with the guilds, show up at the festivals. But, and this is key, Machiavelli warns never to lose your dignity in the process. Mix with the people, sure. Be a patron of talent, but remember, you are the prince. The moment you become common, the mystery is gone. And once the mystery is gone, the authority usually follows. So the lesson is clear. Do big things, pick a side, and never ever let them forget who is in charge.
You can tell a lot about a leader just by looking at the people standing next to him. Actually, Machiavelli argues you can tell everything you need to know. He says the selection of ministers is the very first test of a prince's intelligence, and most fail it. Because if a ruler is surrounded by fools or sycophants, that's on him. He picked them. Machiavelli breaks this down with a brutal kind of simplicity. He claims there are 3 scales of intelligence in this world. First, you have the kind who understands things by themselves. Excellent. Rare, but excellent. Second, you have the kind who appreciates what others understand. Good enough. You can work with that. And third, the kind who understands neither himself nor what others are saying. Machiavelli calls this useless. So, a prince doesn't need to be a genius himself, but he needs enough sense to recognize genius in others. He has to discern who to listen to. But how do you spot a bad apple before they rot the barrel? Machiavelli gives us a fail-safe method, a litmus test. He says to watch the minister closely. If you see that man thinking more of himself than of you, if every action he takes has a little kickback for his own pocket, you're done. Machiavelli warns that such a person will never make a good minister. You can never trust him. The state isn't a side hustle. But, and here's the pragmatic twist, Machiavelli points out this is a two-way street. To keep a servant honest, the prince has to honor him, enrich him, make him feel that he cannot stand without you. Machiavelli argues you have to pile on so many honors and riches that the man doesn't go looking for changes because he knows he'd lose everything if you fall. It's not friendship, it's mutual survival.
This is one of the trickiest parts of leadership, dealing with the ego. Machiavelli knows that powerful men are usually narcissistic. They love hearing how great they are. Who doesn't? But he warns that this vanity is a fatal flaw. It opens the door to a plague found in every court: flatterers. Machiavelli points out a brutal dilemma here. It's a minefield. On one side, you have flatterers who will lie to you, tell you you're a genius while the kingdom burns. On the other side,
If you let everyone speak the truth to you freely, you lose their respect. You become common. If anyone can criticize the prince, where is the awe? Where is the authority?
So, how do you survive this? Machiavelli argues for a third way, a calculated protocol. He advises the prince to choose a small group of wise men, not everyone, just the best, and you give only these men the permission to speak the truth.
But there's a catch. They can only speak the truth when you ask them, not whenever they feel like it. Machiavelli insists the prince must be the one driving the conversation. He has to ask questions constantly, he has to listen, and he has to make it clear that he won't get angry at the truth. In fact, he suggests that if one of these advisors stays silent, the prince should be suspicious. Why aren't they talking? What are they hiding?
But outside of this inner circle, Machiavelli says to ignore everyone else. Be stubborn. Stick to your decisions. If you listen to every wind that blows, you look weak, you look changeable, and a changeable prince is a doomed prince. Ultimately, he drops a hard truth that hurts to hear. He says a prince who isn't wise himself cannot be well advised. You can't outsource judgment. If the leader is a fool, the best advisors in the world can't save him. Wisdom has to start at the top. We're nearing the end now, and Machiavelli stops pulling punches. He looks around at the wreckage of Italy, the King of Naples, the Duke of Milan, and he asks a simple question. Why did they lose? These weren't inexperienced upstarts. They had held power for years. Was it just bad luck? Was it destiny? No. Machiavelli argues it was pure indolence. He starts by pointing out something interesting about new princes. He says a new ruler is watched much closer than a hereditary one. That sounds like a disadvantage, right? But Machiavelli claims it's an opportunity. If a new prince shows he's capable, if he's decisive, he actually wins more loyalty than the guy born into power. Why? Because men are obsessed with the present. If things are good right now, they don't care about the past. So a new prince who builds a solid foundation gets double the glory. He founded the state and secured it. Meanwhile, a prince born into power who loses it, that's double the shame. So what went wrong in Italy? Machiavelli lists the defects explicitly. First, common military failures. They relied on mercenaries. We know how much he hates that. Second, they either made the people hate them or they didn't know how to manage the nobility. If you have a strong army and the people on your side, you don't lose your state. It's that simple. But the real sting comes when he talks about calm times. Machiavelli warns that these princes ruled during peace and never imagined things would change. It's a common human failing, like not worrying about a storm when the sun is shining. So when the wind shifted and war came, they didn't fight, they ran. They fled, hoping the people would eventually get sick of the invaders and call them back. Machiavelli finds this disgusting. He compares it to falling down in a ditch just because you hope someone might eventually pick you up. That's not a strategy, it's cowardice. He concludes with this hard truth. The only good defense is the one you control. It has to come from you, from your own virtue. Machiavelli tackles the big one here. Look, fate. He knows the common sentiment. He knows people look at the chaos of the world and think it's all out of their hands, that God or chance runs the show, so why bother sweating? He admits he's felt that temptation himself, but he refuses to accept it. He pushes back hard. He argues that free will isn't dead. Fortune might control half our actions, but she leaves the other half, or nearly that much, for us to govern. To explain this, he uses a violent, terrifying image. He compares fortune to a torrential river. When it floods, it's a monster. It tears down trees, destroys buildings, washes away the earth. Everyone flees. It looks unstoppable. And in that moment, it is. But Machiavelli makes a critical point. Just because the river is violent in winter doesn't mean you can't work in the summer. When the waters are calm, that's when you build the dikes. That's when you raise the dams. The point isn't to stop the river from existing, it's to channel it. So when the flood inevitably returns, it flows through a canal instead of wiping out your kingdom. He points to Italy as a tragic example, a country without embankments, totally exposed to the flood, unlike the fortified states of Germany or France. Then he shifts to the individual ruler. Why does a man flourish one day and face ruin the next, without changing his character at all? Machiavelli says it's about the times. The world shifts. If a ruler is cautious and the times call for caution, he wins. But if the times swing, if they demand aggression and he stays cautious, he is destroyed. He fails because he cannot change his nature. He fails because he cannot adapt. Machiavelli warns that this rigidity is fatal. We get stuck in our ways. So, what's the verdict? Caution or force? Machiavelli doesn't hesitate. He argues it is better to be impetuous than timid. He famously personifies fortune as a woman, and in his view, she bows to the bold. She resists the hesitant. She yields to those who command her, who treat her roughly, rather than those who respect her power. To survive, he says, you have to be willing to strike first. This is it, the finale. And honestly, it's a curveball. For 25 chapters, Machiavelli has been the cold surgeon. He's been dissecting power with a scalpel, stripping away morality, sentiment, and hope. He's been telling you how to kill, how to lie, and how to keep your boot on the neck of the opposition. It's been clinical, detached. But here, in chapter 26, the mask slips. He stops being the analyst and becomes the patriot. This isn't just a strategy guide anymore. It's a manifesto. It's a desperate, passionate plea to save a country that's bleeding out. Machiavelli looks at Italy, and what does he see? A disaster. It's beaten, stripped, torn apart, and overrun by foreign powers, the barbarians he spits at in the title. But where a lesser mind sees the end, he argues that this chaos isn't a death sentence. It's an opportunity. In fact, he claims it's necessary. He points to the greats, Moses, Cyrus, Theseus. He asks, would they have been great if everything was going well? No. Moses needed the people of Israel to be enslaved in Egypt to show his virtue. Cyrus needed the Persians to be oppressed by the Medes. Theseus needed the Athenians to be scattered. Greatness, Machiavelli insists, requires adversity. And Italy. Italy has adversity in spades. She's more enslaved than the Hebrews, more oppressed than the Persians. She's at rock bottom. So Machiavelli tells the Medici family, the stage is set, the script is written. We just need the actor to step out and take the lead. He warns them, though, opportunity isn't enough. You can have the perfect moment, but if you don't have the will, it means nothing. He tells them that God is willing to help, sure. There are signs, omens, the whole 9 yards. But he drops a heavy line here. He says God doesn't do everything because he doesn't want to take away our free will. He doesn't want to rob us of the glory that belongs to us. That's the pragmatist peeking through the passion. He's saying, don't pray for a miracle, be the miracle. But how? How do you actually beat these foreign armies that have been stomping all over the peninsula? Machiavelli goes back to his favorite drumbeat, the military. He points out that Italy has failed because her military systems are old, they're obsolete. The Spanish and the Swiss infantries are terrifying, sure, But they have weaknesses. He analyzes them. He says the Spanish can't handle cavalry, and the Swiss get scared of stubborn infantry. So he tells the Medici, build a new kind of army. Don't buy mercenaries. Don't borrow troops. Raise your own people. Italians are brave, he argues. Their duels and skirmishes prove it. But their leadership has been garbage. Give them a new formation, a new order, and they will hold the line against anyone. He closes with pure emotion. He says the people are ready. They are waiting for a flag to follow. They are sick of the looting, the taxes, the foreign cruelty. If the Medici step up, the doors will open. Tears of joy, undying loyalty. He ends by quoting Petrarch, "Virtue against fury will take up arms, and the battle will be short." It's a stirring end to a brutal book. Machiavelli argues that power isn't just for keeping your seat warm, it's for this, to take a broken thing and make it whole again, to liberate, but only if you have the guts to do what's necessary.